As the cliché saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Star Wars The Clone Wars conceived in 2008 as a CGI animated TV show, bridging the 3-year gap between the events of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, was brutally cancelled mid-production amongst Disney's takeover of Lucasfilm in late 2012. Therefore, production for The Clone Wars had stopped entirely. Although we had the Lost Missions which were added to Netflix in 2014, this was the last of what remained as far as completed production was concerned. Little did we realise until information started pouring out in the months following this release. But the entire show more or less had been scripted into the first drafting phase. The story of The Clone Wars was planned out all the way from the mid-6th season to the finale story arc, which would have taken us to 8 seasons in total. During the Celebration Anaheim convention, audiences were treated to unfinished animation reels, full unfinished episodes later published online, and a rich source of information about what we sadly missed out on due to the premature cancellation of the series. The missing episodes consisted of over 60 individual production episodes, and according to both Dave Filoni and Pablo Hidalgo, would have added 13 more Clone Wars story arcs as the last piece of expansion from the man himself, George Lucas. Fortunately, after many leaks and rumours surrounding this finale story arc, Disney were wise enough to shuffle around in their vault of intellectual properties and find a way of bringing back the Clone Wars once and for all, for the grand total of only 12 episodes.
What?
We were lucky to even hear acknowledgement of the Clone Wars for its 10-year anniversary, let alone with how the new Star Wars era is now the main era for both publicity and marketing purposes. However, my frustration with what we are missing stems from what we already know about the unfinished episodes, and also what we have already seen. Whether this is the unfinished story reels, or expanded media such as the Son of Dathomir comic book, or the novelization of Dark Disciple, what could have been the absolute best content in all of the Clone Wars series. The purposes behind this video are to theorize how the Clone Wars may be granted the unfinished episodes set before the Season 7 finale, The Siege of Mandalore. For those who do not know, this 4-episode story arc was always intended to be the grand finale to the entire Clone Wars series. And yes, even though this is the ending, how exactly can the show continue if this vital piece is already part of the puzzle? The Clone Wars, like all of Star Wars to this degree, is an anthology series. For those unaware of this concept, an anthology in relation to media entertainment is comprised of alternating episodes revolving around different characters, locations, and storylines. The only overarching difference with Star Wars is that this trope applies to an ongoing story with a much bigger picture at its absolute core. With this taken into consideration, the Clone Wars has consistently managed to go back and forth over the years with certain storylines, expanding on specific narratives for further gratification or expository reasons, adding elements to generate a bigger picture for the stories that may have felt slightly incomplete shows how non-linear the Clone Wars can be as a show. A brief example of this is demonstrated with the Season 1 finale episode, Hostage Crisis, giving us our first look at the bounty hunter Cad Bane, a fan favourite character. In the chronology of the Clone Wars, this is actually preceded by the 3rd season episode Evil Plans, and to then stir the pot even further, this is technically not the first encounter with Cad Bane. Our introduction to the character is actually supposed to be in the Season 2 premiere episode Holocron Heist. So how exactly does this idea fit with the incomplete story arcs that were never brought to the TV screen? Well, as far as sourced information is concerned, each of these stories is still technically considered to be canon to Star Wars, despite obviously not being presented to us in the full. Therefore, these episodes could be given to us separately without the worry for chronology. Not including the 3 arcs from the new Revival series, these stories are listed as follows: Crystal Crisis on Utapau, Son of Dathomir, Dark Disciple Part 1 and Part 2, The Bounty Hunter Arc, Return to Mon Cala, Return to the Jedi Temple, Yoda on Kashyyyk with the Bad Batch, Rex and R2-D2 in a Top Gun team-up, and the most inexplicable arc of them all, the Yuuzhan Vong. These stories are taken from the second half of Season 6 and all of the scheduled Season 7 and Season 8. Each story arc would have consisted of 4 episodes each following on from the Netflix season titled The Lost Missions. Despite the Clone Wars now being officially over, wrapping up with the finale story arc, it does not necessarily mean that the show is now done forever. With these unfinished stories stuck in a liminal status of existence, with enough support they very well could be put into production. With the anthology story structure, adding more episodes set before the events of the Siege of Mandalore would not fluctuate the continuity, and would instead expand on the events leading up to Revenge of the Sith. The Clone Wars show is made up of chapters in the events of what actually takes place during the Clone Wars. Adding the additional episodes we long for would only strengthen the impact of how the story is told from beginning to end.
I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
It's heroin.
It is no secret that fans of the Clone Wars have been vocal for more content ever since the cancellation was officially announced. With online petitions, trending hashtags, and now the new current trend of Complete the Clone Wars, arguably I see a high demand for more content from Lucasfilm Animation. Based on the statistics we have from Disney Plus surrounding Season 7, it is more than evident that people are subscribing to the streaming service and enjoying the show to its fullest extent. With original shows like The Mandalorian driving subscriptions, in particular this may represent how the television side of Star Wars has grown in popularity. Disney Plus originals are driving the subscriptions, but most people will need a reason to stay subscribed. By having the entirety of the Clone Wars series available to stream at the click of a button on Disney Plus, the show is ranked in the top 5 of trending shows week in, week out. Oftentimes upon the release of new episodes, the show even hits the number 1 spot on trending. Having the series appear on the Disney Plus home screen reinforces the show's popularity, and may even entice newcomers who are curious about the series. The popularity is ranked surprisingly high, above the likes of The Simpsons, typical children's classics like Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse, and even above new theatrical releases like Pixar's Onward. I feel this heavily argues how the consumption of this series is a weighted success for Disney Plus and for the revival as a whole to generate such a stir. Perhaps this could have been Disney and Lucasfilm testing the waters for more stories to come from the Clone Wars era. After all, fans are not hiding their love for the show. Even the production team of the Clone Wars are anchoring to stir fans in a direction that begs for even more of what we are all hoping to see. Gianni Aliotti, a supervisor for the visuals at Lucasfilm Animation, funnily enough tweeted the following: "Glad to see so much love for our work in the Clone Wars again. Keep loving them and we'll keep making more. And fear not, we at Lucasfilm Animation are still going strong even during COVID-19. Hearing these words straight from the production team is not only a blessing of acknowledging the vocal fans sharing their love for the series, but it also encompasses the passion behind producing the series. Granted, a tweet like this does not necessarily mean anything of significance about a second show revival. In fact, it only happens to mention the Clone Wars, and that the written context is likely about Lucasfilm Animation in general. Regardless of how you wish to perceive these words, it does appear the production team is still eager to continue the series, and hopefully may provide a boost to our cause to hopefully one day complete the Clone Wars.
Let's cut the chatter and finish what we started."
Arguments against the idea of more Clone Wars refer to the current show formation, not knowing how the show could have more content beyond the so-called final season. With modern media consumption mostly based around streaming entertainment, bringing more content for the Clone Wars would serve easily, without tampering with the current formation we have of seasons 1 through to 7, and therefore adding more content set before the events of the final season. In 2014, a multimedia project appropriately titled Clone Wars Legacy was launched to repurpose the stories that were sadly lost and generate them into other media publications. As of right now, this project appears to have quickly run its course. The wider contributions consisted of Son of Dathomir, a 4-part comic book series, and the novelization of Dark Disciple, both making their way to us under the Legacy title. Also included are the unfinished story reels for Crystal Crisis on Utapau, and the then incomplete Bad Batch arc, both having full audio and storytelling, needing the finalized animation to be completed. With no official announcements or plans for other cancelled episodes being released under alternative methods, I think it is safe to think of this project as currently on hold. This could possibly be viewed as a disadvantage with no plans for the other stories. On the other hand, if the Legacy multimedia project is on hold, perhaps this could be viewed as an opportunity to bring them back to our screens. In terms of how a second revival could work to bring the unfinished episodes to the masses, I personally feel that there are two viable options at the hands of Lucasfilm Animation. My first idea comes in the form of a new one-off miniseries following up on the Lost Missions. In the exact same anthology style, each of these story arcs will be self-contained enough so as not to confuse the viewers of the original show. The primary focus of this added expansion would be to tie up the loose ends for characters such as Darth Maul, Asajj Ventress, and Cad Bane to name a few. A second, or perhaps even third volume of the Lost Missions could be commissioned to fill this void. Ideally, this would be the easiest way to develop more episodes of the show. It would neatly slip between the first volume of missing episodes and the final season as termed by the publicity and marketing from Disney+. Assuming this idea is not possible, and that the show cannot be commissioned for more episodes, if the Clone Wars were to continue outside of the familiar episode formation, my second suggestion would be more cinematic, just like the Siege of Mandalore. With the cancelled story arcs having 4 episodes each, production for these stories could potentially be generated into individual feature film specials released exclusively for streaming on Disney+. The only disadvantage to this idea is that certain story arcs would potentially be cut out in favour of others. Disney could market a series of Clone Wars feature films based around specific characters, giving fans what they want, while simultaneously providing conclusive ends for certain stories originally going to feature during the Clone Wars series. The story arcs that I feel have a fighting chance to become feature films are listed as follows. Son of Dathomir, revealing how Darth Maul escaped his former master. This would provide the necessary backstory before the events of the Siege of Mandalore. The Bounty Hunter arc. Centered on Boba Fett, this would bring his origin story full circle while also giving fan-favourite character Cad Bane a satisfying conclusion, as was teased in the original unfinished animation reel. Dark Disciple. With how lengthy this story arc is, this could potentially be split into 2 parts, dividing its 8-episode long story into 2 80-minute features. As expected, its character focus would be on both Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos, providing an on-screen depiction of the original novel as the planned episodes intended. Kashyyyk. This arc is tricky because originally it was intended to give further insight to Yoda having good relations with the Wookiees. However, I feel this should be a clone-centric movie, giving its primary focus to the Bad Batch with Echo, which would therefore follow on from where Echo departs from Rex in Season 7, Episode 4. Having Yoda in this plot would be an added bonus for purposeful exposition to his story in Revenge of the Sith. Crystal Crisis on Utapau. Once again, this story is not necessarily an easy story to tie to a specific character, other than to perhaps think of this as an Obi-Wan and Anakin standalone adventure. This arc would provide further character development to Anakin as he struggles with Ahsoka's decision to leave the Jedi Order. With the humour aspect, it would also prove to be more of a buddy movie, once again getting a small victory over General Grievous. For those that have not seen the unfinished story reels, I 100% recommend giving them a watch, despite them being unfinished of course. With 5, perhaps even 6 feature films, this would sadly remove some of the unfinished arcs from the equation. But then again, it could also open up possibilities for both extensions in the near future, which would also leave the door open for more content when the time is right. Doing a series of films would also add opportunities for both rewrites, providing better pacing, and further character development to fit with the Clone Wars story. With how self-contained the majority of these arcs appear to be, it would once again act as a bonus expansion, tying up all the pivotal loose ends which we have already referenced.
Squeak. Blast them. Bang!
Squeak, squeak.
In terms of how realistic a second revival of the Clone Wars could be, I would honestly like to say it is very possible given how well the first revival run has performed for Disney+. It does appear Lucasfilm Animation shares the enthusiasm for this style of Star Wars content, in particular with rumours of a sequel series to Star Wars Rebels hitting production in the not too distant future. It would be a shame to forget about the planned stories that were yet to be seen by Star Wars fans alike. And hopefully in the near future, if these stories are added in some form or another to the animated world of Star Wars, this will finally give us a complete look at the Clone Wars. What all of this boils down to is whether or not Dave Filoni, the co-creator of the show, would be willing to spend more time on the series, and also if he would be willing to pay a second farewell to the stories that he helped create. Filoni was always beside George Lucas, who oversaw full production of the original series run. Filoni does have the skill and the knowledge to pull off one last set of projects for this beloved animated series. However, my doubts sadly lie with how he feels about wrapping up the show once and for all. Speaking from the heart, Filoni has stated that working on the revival series of the Clone Wars was not the same without George Lucas. This is completely understandable, recognizing that Filoni has moved on since his original project created for Cartoon Network. Filoni has also mentioned in various interviews that for the moment, he is looking at other projects to tackle following his involvement with the live-action series The Mandalorian. This is a change in pace for Filoni's career path, and due to a busy schedule, fitting in even more of the Clone Wars would potentially be off the cards for the time being. He has also stated word for word in several interviews that this is indeed the end of the Clone Wars.
So, you know, it is the end of the Clone Wars, but I think it's when you see it, you'll see why. And it's a really good thing, but that's not to say it can't launch other exciting things as well.
This could be interpreted in a different context, and that he is only confirming that the final season is the end of the story, but not necessarily the end for the Clone Wars stories, with more stories still yet to be told. Thank you for listening to my video essay on how I feel the Clone Wars television show could potentially continue. To summarise, the door is thankfully left open for more content to come in the near future, if this were to happen. As we have discussed, fan demand is at an all-time high with all the new episodes streaming to Disney+, and as we have detailed, options are visible as to how the show could complete the missing episodes that have been teased since 2015. If you wish to join the movement on Twitter, the hashtag #CompleteTheCloneWars is often active, especially when the official Star Wars page decides to tweet something. You can also follow my account on Twitter at Dr. Anrak if you wish to do so, and please do leave a like on the video if you did enjoy, and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in my next video.
Are you threatening me?